So welcome to the first webinar of 2025 for the Use and Influence in Evaluation TIG. Again, I'm Charmaine Campbell-Patton. I use she, her pronouns. I'm one of the co-chairs. And I'm joined by Moira Reagan is my other co-chair. I want to say hi. And then we have Jennifer Villalobos and Hope Gilbert are our program chairs and co-chair, and Minji Cho is our webmaster. So welcome to all of them. And we also have a number of co-sponsors. We have the cluster multi-site and multi-level evaluation TIG members. If you are part of that TIG, I want to thank the leadership of that TIG for sharing this with their members, as well as the health and evaluation TIG. So we're really trying to do more cross-TIG collaboration and wanting to explore use and influence across different areas, different topics, different types of evaluation. But today we're really planning to ground ourselves in both the history of this TIG and of use and influence and how that came to be, as well as looking forward the future and knowing that things are very changing rapidly, turbulent times, and want to acknowledge all of that. And the context in which we're operating is changing every day. And so we're doing our best to hold that, recognizing where we came from, as well as the path that we're on, not knowing what that will hold. And so just welcome you all into that space. And I also want to acknowledge that I am hosting this meeting from Dakota land and Anishinaabe territory in Minnesota, but we're joined from people all around, I know, the United States and probably other parts of the world. And so wanting to invite you to share where you're joining from in the chat and the original caretakers of that land, if you want to share that as well, so that we hold that in the context in which we're operating as we move forward. And I'm sorry, my cat is stuck on my shirt. Okay, there we go. So we have lots of animals behind the scenes in this call. We already acknowledged when we were starting as well. So your animals are welcome to this space as well. So with all of those introductions and kind of some of that laying the foundation, I want to introduce our first speaker. We have several folks who are going to help us set that stage and do a little bit of history as well as looking forward. And our first speaker is Karen Kirkhart. So Karen is one of the original members of the Use and Influence TIG and has been doing evaluation work for many decades and has a deep history, but also really has seen the development of how things have evolved with this TIG over many years. And so we really wanted to invite her into this space to help us, for those of us who are new or who are, like to remember how things got started. We want to invite her to ground us in that as we move forward. So Karen, welcome, and I will pass it to you.
Thank you, Charmaine. Good afternoon and welcome. I'm Karen Kirkhart, and I'm currently Professor Emerita of Social Work at Syracuse University in upstate New York on the historic land of the Haudenosaunee. I'm also an affiliate of CREA, the Center for Culturally Responsive Evaluation and Assessment out of University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign. I served as president of AEA in 1994 and as chair of what was then called the Evaluation Use TIG from 2003 to 2008. But this TIG was one of the original topical interests groups established when the Evaluation Network and Evaluation Research Society came together to form AEA. It grew quickly to become the largest TIG, partly due to the recognition that use is fundamental to evaluation, and partly due to our rather generic title, which drew anyone who used, in the sense of conducted or performed, evaluation to join. Evaluation has always sought to make a difference. While terminology varied, issues of use, non-use, and misuse of evaluation were taken up in early publications. Michael published the first edition of utilization-focused evaluation in 1978, and the following year, Marv, along with Dalek and White, published Using Evaluations, Does Evaluation Make a Difference? Early attention was to instrumental use of evaluation results, but it expanded to broader types of results-based influence, and then to influence emanating from the process of evaluation itself, both before, during, and after a given period of inquiry. Our appreciations of the pathways, facets, and varieties of influence evolved, becoming more complex and systemic. Yet, the current moment of our country takes us back to early basic concerns of non-use and misuse of evaluation in ways that are both shocking and humbling. The shared values and principles of our profession and others are demonized and disregarded. Complexities of validity and influence are discarded, replaced by the exercise of brute power. Evidence is both cast aside, for example, rejecting climate change, and misused to create false narratives, for example, the pernicious impact of DEI on airline safety. Social justice and democracy are under attack. And somewhat ironically, this seismic shift demands even greater attention to influence, both intended and unintended. We know where to look. We have conceptual frameworks and tools to track the impact of actions and information across time and locations. We recognize the power of unintended outcomes. For whom are the impacts beneficial, and for whom are they deadly? We know how to document and share this information. Never has the knowledge base of this TIG had greater social relevance. And I will then turn it over to Michael.
Well, Karen has done an excellent job of framing both our past and our present and the challenges that we face. As we began, we were mainly concerned about non-use and finding ways to increase and enhance use. And early on in conversations with Marv Alkin and with this TIG, with Karen, we hypothesized that as use increased, misuse might well increase. And Marv introduced the term misevaluation as a way of describing evaluations that weren't worth using. So in our early, more positive view of things, we were assuming that evaluations would be well done and the issue was how to get them used. But we also had to become concerned that some evaluations weren't worth using and to be able to judge when it was appropriate not to use an evaluation because of misevaluation. And across time then, this combination of concerns about both the positive and appropriate use of evaluation and the misuse, cherry picking, public relations, censoring findings, not including the different kinds of balanced data. All of these have become part of our concern. And I want to build on what Karen has talked about and Charmaine's introduction by bringing us into this current period. I'm going to share my screen. And so as we've talked about non-use coming into concern about misuse and misevaluation, we are now part of this larger issue that has intensified during the pandemic between the political and the scientific that involves this tug of war between facts, evidence, truth, data, reality, thinking. A great deal of emphasis in the last decade on evaluative thinking as a form of process use, that we not only work with people and programs to produce evaluation findings, but to think evaluatively about how they're designing programs and how they're using the findings that come out of it for development of programs. against post-truth, fake news, alternative facts, make-believe, groupthink, distortions. We are a part of that larger kind of battle in this age of misinformation, disinformation, lies and truth getting mixed up. And as we think about why all this matters, I want to quote one of our great founders, Eleanor Chilinsky, who was a former president of AEA as well, and was the founder and director of the Government Accountability Office Program and Evaluation Methodology Division between 1980 and 1994. Eleanor knew as much about federal evaluation and evaluation use as anyone. She ran an agency, a division with 80 to 100 people, produced 40 to 50 evaluations any given year, and covered the whole range of things that government is involved in. Near her death, she gave an interview in which she talked about the high political stakes. And she said, telling the truth to people who may not want to hear it at all is, after all, the chief purpose of evaluation. And that we have looked at three arenas in which we do truth-telling: speaking truth to power, empowering, giving voice to the voiceless, those whose truth is not typically heard by the powerful, and speaking truth to each other as a profession. As Eleanor reflected on all of this, she said, if you ask me what was the most important thing we've achieved during the 45 years or so that evaluation and politics have been partnered, I'd say you need to look beyond the individual effects we've had on specific policies or programs over time, even though many of these effects have been substantive and consequential. She said, in my judgment, the major accomplishment of evaluation has been the establishment and demonstration of a trustworthy, dependable tool in government for carrying out and preserving political accountability. And she went on to say, so we have to get it right, because if we don't try and don't succeed, and systematic evaluation of what the government is doing becomes a thing of the past, then our failure would affect not only evaluation itself, but also our democracy and its political freedoms. When you come right down to it, she said, we're like canaries in the mine shaft. Our presence means that public accountability is alive and well. But if we go, the nation will have lost a lot more than evaluation. Eleanor was one of our great wise founders. She knew politics as well as anyone, and her words are especially prescient now as we think about not just the use of particular evaluations, which is how we began, but the use of evaluation more generally as a way of thinking, as a form of dialogue, democratic dialogue, as a way for the citizenry to engage with each other about the nature of evidence and sorting out what it means for something to work or not work. All of that is deeply threatened at this moment. And it will be important for the profession, both domestically and internationally, to come together and express what is at stake here with the future of evaluation in public accountability. I'll stop there.
Thank you, Michael, and thank you, Karen, so much for grounding us in the history and the reality and implications of where we're at. We're gonna turn now to Jennifer and Minji, two of our TIG leaders, to talk a little bit more about emerging issues in use and influence and where they have seen the field headed and this topic headed. And so they will ground us in kind of the future and looking forward as best as we can in this time. So Jennifer and Minji, I'll pass it over to you.
Thank you. And thank you, Karen and Michael, for grounding us, not just in the history, but in the current state of evaluation. And what we wanted to do also, just given that we're very close to proposal season or proposal due dates, is to not just think about these kind of current trends and topics of the field, but also how they might relate to some options or ideas for present or for proposals at AEA this year. So Minji, are you able to share the slides?
Yeah, let me do that.
Just a few slides just to ground us in the different topics. So these are definitely not exhaustive of the, you know, all the current trends and topics, but kind of some of the big ones that have come out in recent webinars and also are, you know, the current kind of state of things at this time. Do you need me to do it, Minj?
Yeah, Jen, can you share the screen? Sorry,
Okay.
I can't really find my Google Doc now.
No worries.
Oh, okay.
Okay, let me get us going here. So, yes, like I said, these are just some emerging topics as it relates to, you know, our TIC focus, not just using evaluation products and processes, but how evaluation influences the field and the broader, you know, environment as well. So these are some these are some ideas around potential alignment with the proposal theme, which is engaging community and sharing leadership. So Minji will be reviewing a little bit about current era and challenges, cultural values and use and influence. And then I'll cover some kind of potential enhancements of use and influence through AI. I think we're a little bit backwards here. Well, we'll start with, here we go. Okay, Minj.
No, oh yeah, sure, I can cover this, but we don't want to just repeat that again, but as Karen and Michael already talked about this current era and how that is related to the history of the use and influence, we just want to bring your attention to one of the questions that AE actually proposed as part of this proposal and the conference themes. One of the questions actually is really hitting on us to how can we gain the attention of the society by sharing communications and information and re-examining our understanding of knowledge, data, and stories. So we want to think about, as Michael talked about, the non-use and misuse, as well as the mis-evaluation, and then how we can bring into our proposal and then share that through the conference. And the other thing, maybe Jennifer, we can go to the cultural values in use and influence. Of course, this is not a new topic. As Karen already talked about the culture, we talked about a lot of diversity, social justice, and the cultural values, how this actually promoting the use and influence. And the other question, the proposal questions that the AA ask us to also bring up is that can evaluators, we can ask new questions and integrate the contemporary evaluation approaches and to advance the field, which is enhancing the use and influence, and while being mindful of the diverse perspective of the community and the organizations. So we want to actually think about definitely use focus evaluation, but also think about the different approaches, CRE, decolonizing indigenous evaluation approaches, as well as the community-based approaches, and how that is actually grounded on the diverse perspectives and bringing the cultural values with our reflection to promote the use and influence. So that's something that you can also think about as you work on the proposal. So I will hand this over to Jennifer about the AI and use and influence.
Yeah, so last year, I actually had a roundtable. There were quite a few sessions on AI. And at the time, it was kind of, the sentiment was, you know, are we going to be using AI in eval? What are the implications? And, you know, what is it? What is it that we're tapping into? And it seems like since then, it's just much more mainstream. Now it's in kind of every tool and device that we're using. And so I would say that now maybe that's just shifted a little bit to it is here. And now a lot more of my clients or the programs that I'm working with are using it in their own processes. So now I think the conversation might be shifting a little bit to how can we use these technologies to enhance use and influence, while also ensuring that we're remaining ethical and equitable in our practice. And so these are just, it's not a comprehensive list, but some areas where we can enhance, if, you know, used responsibly and ethically, our influence of evaluation through language accessibility, broader reach to larger, maybe more representative samples, innovations in reporting and dissemination, being able to communicate information in ways potentially that are more accessible to different audiences, enhance interest holder engagement, and just recently we published a paper on open data, right? So open data and open science, and being able to leverage these technologies to make to advance things like that that are helpful for our field. So with that, we were going to move over to talking, creating some opportunity for you all to contribute, and I was going to hand it over now to Hope.
Thanks, Jennifer. So we have 4 rooms set up, and if there are other rooms or other topic areas that people want to hop into, we're happy to create those on the fly as well. But right now we have 4 groups where you can choose to go into for further small group discussion. The first one will be proposal collaboration, because just as a reminder, our responses are due by March the 7th if you want to go to Kansas City this year. The second one is current evaluation and challenges. The third, cultural values in use and influence. And then the last one, AI in use and influence. So if you'll just select the breakout group of your choice, should be able to choose there, and we will have some additional discussion for about the next 20 minutes. Is that right, Charmaine? Are we good to go there?
So I know that you probably could have kept talking. 20 minutes is hardly enough to cover all of the things to talk about in these large topics, but would love to hear just maybe a highlight, 1 or 2 sentences from each group on what you talked about, and if there's anything, any calls to action or things that you would like to share with the big group about ways that you see things moving forward. Let's start with the group 1 with the proposal collaborations. Any good ideas come out, or anything you wanna, any invitations you wanna make to collaborate to the others in the group?
Okay, oh, go ahead.
Oh,
You talk.
We're just extra polite in our group. So we talked about as you can, from the TIG, a lot of it was using the evaluation findings in a more systemic way to institutionalize some things as far as leadership goes. And we also talked about capacity building. And I'm going to throw out that Amy and I were considering something related to health professions and physician scientists, and sort of how some of those findings might be used within a university or health sciences context. And just making sure that we're actually thinking about how leadership can really incorporate some of these things that we've learned among the years or in specific projects.
wonderful, thank you. Current era and challenges. I see a note in the chat about that. Is there anything anyone else from that group wants to highlight around current challenges, current era and challenges?
Sorry.
I'll read the chat. Our talk on current challenges highlighted the need to rethink our language and placement of labels. It reminded me of terms of inclusion, data, discourse, violence. The link is in the chat of that article. A lot of talk about what we call things, what language we use and don't use going on today for sure, and how that influences and might influence the use of the evaluation depending on what terms are allowed or not allowed. Anything else from that group? We'll move on to cultural values and use and influence. Anyone from that group want to share? Such a quiet group we have. Karen.
Well, a lot of us talked about going to Korea instead of AEA this year. And that led to a productive conversation, I thought, about the limitations of AEA being the size that it is, and that if people who were, say, rejected, who had proposals rejected last year, chose not to come or didn't put proposals in, that might not be a bad thing, because it might shrink it down to a more conversational and interactive conference. So I don't know, Christopher, you had other ideas. Why don't you? No, don't want to. Okay.
Well, it made me think maybe we should, for those of you who are going to Korea, maybe we can try to organize something around use and influence at Korea, because I will be there as well. So see what I can come up with. And if you're interested, reach out to me and I'll see if we can do something, maybe a little happy hour or a sidebar chat. I don't know what that will look like. Conferences are busy, but it's good to connect when we're in person for sure. All right, how about AI? What's our AI group want to share?
So I think we mostly focus on like examples of what folks are using AI for in analysis and reporting. A few of those examples include analyzing either individual documents or larger sets of documents, doing an initial pass of coding of transcripts to kind of pull themes, attach quotes, and doing kind of an initial machine pass followed by the human pass. And then kind of the opposite of that of if you've done more, traditional coding, go back and run it through an AI and see if it catches anything that you missed the first time around, and using it as a supplemental tool. And then a couple of conversation points around AI tends to try to please you and to try to find an answer no matter what. So being careful about your prompts and always validating the outputs that you get. Also, if you're using kind of a chatbot type tool, it remembers it remembers what you've been doing and learns from it up until then. So process wise, if you're going in a different direction, you need to either reset or go back to somewhere earlier in your analysis. And then finally, I think talking about tools you can interact with and do your own, creating your own prompts and interacting and fine tuning your analysis tends to work better than, at least currently, the off-the-shelf solutions that have a little magic button included that's like, AI, code my work. So, still there's purpose for the human still in designing those prompts and interacting and understanding your data. A little more on the methods than the use, but.
Okay, all right. Thank you. Well, I know we're getting close to the end of the hour. Moira, do you want to take us home with kind of what we're thinking in terms of next steps?
Yeah, so first of all, thank you to everybody for joining today. Thank you to Michael and Karen for being our guests, and to Minji and Jennifer for presenting. We are really trying to do more collaboration with other TIGs, so we would like to also thank CMME and Health Evaluation for joining today and being co-sponsors of this webinar. We are looking to do 2 more in the next 2 months. I think March, we're looking at office hours, where we can talk about review criteria for proposals, maybe do working groups. We'll be sending out some information on that. And then we're looking at health and evaluation, presenting on the CDC framework sometime after that. We also would love to hear from you if there are certain topics that you would like us to cover, if there are certain collaborations you think would make sense, and if there are other TIGs you're part of that you think would be great for us to talk to. Oh, thank you, Jennifer. That is a really important point that we need to make. We need proposal reviewers. There is a link in the chat, and if you would be willing to help, we would very much appreciate it. There will be quite a few proposals coming in. They're coming in soon. And so we're going to be starting our reviews in March. If anyone is willing to take on a small number of them or a large number of them, please do give us your contact, and we would love to have you be a part of that review process. Anybody else from the TIG have any closing thoughts?
We will send an email out with this recording and the notes doc. And Minji, the office hours idea was originally when we thought we'd have more time after this webinar to work on proposals. Now it won't be so much possible to do a working session in March, except that next week, if you are interested, Minji has agreed to host at this exact time next Wednesday, just an open Zoom, where if you want to come keep talking about proposals, or you want to, connect with someone about what your proposal is and get some feedback, that will be available. So we'll send that link out to everyone who attended. And it's just kind of an informal space, but we want to make sure that you all have the opportunity to continue to engage in these topics. And so we'll do our best to make those spaces and welcome your input and ideas for sure.
All right. Thanks, Charmaine.
Thank you for bringing us together.
Thank you, Karen, and thank you, Michael. Thank you, Minji and Jennifer, for your contributions, and for everyone for engaging. Good luck out there.
Thanks.
Good to see you, Marv.